This is the Terracotta Army. 8,000 warriors buried over 2,000 years ago. One of the greatest wonders of the world.
Every year, millions of visitors travel to Xi'an, China, and stand quietly above one of the greatest archaeological discoveries ever made. They gaze into enormous underground pits, where thousands of silent clay warriors stand in perfect formation. Most leave believing they have seen the entire mystery, but they have only seen the entrance. Beneath those famous soldiers lies another story, one that is far darker than most people realize. A story of hidden chambers, forgotten deaths, and secrets buried so deeply that they were never meant to be uncovered. Before we uncover what lies beneath, please subscribe to this channel and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support helps us continue bringing you incredible stories hidden within history. When explorer and scientist Albert Lin began investigating the Terracotta Army, he was not searching for beautiful statues. He wanted to understand what existed beneath them. As his advanced scanners penetrated deeper into the earth, the picture that emerged became increasingly unsettling. It slowly became clear that China's first emperor had not simply built a tomb. He had created an entire underground kingdom. Researchers have long known that the Terracotta Army contains roughly 8,000 life-sized clay soldiers, each sculpted with unique facial features. Yet those warriors occupy only a small portion of a burial complex, stretching across thousands of acres. To many archaeologists, the soldiers were only the outer boundary of something much larger. The emperor appeared to have recreated nearly every part of his empire beneath the ground. Clay stables stood beside clay horses. Bronze tools remained remarkably functional after more than 2,000 years. Birds, farm equipment, servants, animals, and countless details of everyday life were carefully reproduced, as though an entire civilization had been copied beneath the earth. It was as if the emperor intended to continue ruling forever. That idea becomes even more intriguing when viewed alongside historical records. China's first emperor spent much of his life searching for immortality. Ancient documents describe him sending expeditions across the known world, consulting alchemists and mystics, and consuming substances believed to extend life indefinitely. His search was no legend, it was an obsession. To him, death was not an unavoidable fate. It was simply another problem waiting to be solved. Some historians believe that when every search for immortality failed, he turned his attention to the only project grand enough to match his ambition, his own burial complex. According to one theory, this was never designed as a resting place. It was designed as a machine. Every clay warrior, every channel believed to contain liquid mercury, every painted constellation inside the hidden chambers. Together, they may have formed an enormous ritual landscape intended to guide the emperor's spirit back from death. Whether symbolic or literal, the precision is difficult to ignore. The warriors do not face random directions. They face east, toward the lands the emperor spent his lifetime conquering. Even in death, he appears positioned for another campaign. Nothing about the complex feels accidental. That realization became even stronger when Albert Lin arrived to investigate it. Unlike traditional archaeologists, Lin works with technology capable of seeing through the earth itself. His equipment was originally developed for locating buried objects in active conflict zones. Ground-penetrating radar, aerial scanning systems, and advanced imaging technologies allow him to read the landscape almost the way medical imaging reads the human body. His work has taken him into some of the world's most challenging archaeological environments. Yet even that experience did not prepare him for what awaited beneath the Terracotta Army. For decades, the most sensitive parts of the site remained under exceptionally tight government control. Drone flights were prohibited. Every survey required official approval. Even experienced Chinese researchers often had access to only a portion of the available information. Knowledge about the site was deliberately divided between different teams, ensuring that very few people understood the complete picture. Somehow, Albert Lin obtained permission to investigate areas no foreign researcher had previously been allowed to study. Exactly how that permission was granted has never been publicly explained. The atmosphere changed the moment his team arrived. Uniformed officers watched every movement. Each piece of equipment was inspected before entering the site. Every drone flight required individual authorization. Every scan was monitored in real time by government officials standing only a few steps away. Nothing happened without oversight. As Lin and his team assembled their instruments among the silent warriors, something about the place felt different. It was not the temperature. It was not the depth. It was something harder to describe. Later, Lin recalled that standing in the middle of the burial complex felt like entering a place that had never been intended for the living. That feeling became stronger as he walked through sections of the site that very few people had ever entered. Around him stood thousands of clay soldiers. Some appeared ready to draw their weapons. Others stood motionless with expressions that felt strangely lifelike. Nearby rested clay horses frozen in mid-stride. Ancient chariots still retained remarkably intact wheels. Bronze swords and spearheads remained sharp enough to function even today. Scattered tools looked as though their owners had simply laid them down and intended to return. Every chamber felt suspended outside time. Nothing appeared abandoned. Everything appeared paused. But Lin was not there to admire the artistry. He had come to discover what no human eye could see. And beneath the silent army, his instruments began revealing something far more mysterious than anyone expected. What Lin felt inside the burial complex was not simply a figure of speech. Very few people had ever stood where he was standing. Fewer still had been allowed to point scientific instruments beneath those ancient floors and ask what was hiding below. As he moved deeper into the complex, it felt as though he had stepped into a world abandoned by time itself. Around him, thousands of clay warriors stood silently in perfect formation. Some looked ready to draw their weapons at any moment. Others stood completely motionless, their stillness somehow more unsettling than open aggression. Every face seemed to carry its own expression, as though each soldier had once belonged to a real army frozen in place forever. Nearby, ancient chariots rested exactly where they had been left. Their wheels remained remarkably intact, despite more than 2,000 years underground. Clay horses stood frozen in mid-stride, forever waiting for riders who would never return. Bronze swords and spearheads still possessed edges sharp enough to remind visitors that they had once been real weapons, not merely decorations. Even ordinary tools remained where workers had last placed them, making it seem as though they had stepped away for only a moment and simply never came back. Every chamber told the same story. Time had not passed there. It had stopped. But Albert Lin had not traveled halfway around the world to admire extraordinary craftsmanship. He had come to discover what could not be seen with the human eye. That was when the real investigation began. His drones lifted into the air carrying sophisticated scanning equipment capable of mapping structures hidden beneath the ground. Across the excavation site, his team slowly pushed ground-penetrating radar systems over the surface, sending carefully measured pulses deep into the earth beneath their feet. Hour after hour, new information appeared on their monitors. As Lin watched the endless rows of silent warriors from above, an uneasy thought slowly settled over the entire team. The beauty of the sculptures almost seemed to serve a purpose. Their perfect formation naturally drew every visitor's attention toward the soldiers themselves, keeping their eyes fixed on what stood above the ground instead of wondering what might be buried underneath. To the researchers, it no longer felt like coincidence. It felt like a pattern. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure that whatever existed below would remain hidden forever. The feeling was made even stranger by stories that had surrounded the site for centuries. Long before the Terracotta Army was officially discovered in 1974, nearby villages regarded the area as cursed. Local families passed down stories warning people to leave the land undisturbed. When farmers accidentally uncovered the first warriors while digging a well, many later believed their lives had changed forever. Some lost their farmland after the government acquired the site. Others reportedly suffered unexplained illnesses, giving rise to rumors that something buried beneath the earth had been awakened. Whether those stories were true or not, they formed part of the history surrounding the site. Lin understood the legends, but he also understood the difference between folklore and evidence. He was a scientist, yet even a scientist cannot completely ignore the atmosphere of a place where thousands of people may have met violent deaths beneath layers of clay, stone, and silence. His greatest advantage was technology. Ground-penetrating radar works by sending carefully controlled energy pulses into the earth. Whenever those waves strike something solid, a buried wall, an underground floor, a chamber, or any dense object, they bounce back toward the surface. Computers then transform those returning signals into detailed maps, allowing researchers to visualize structures that remain completely invisible from above. It is, in many ways, like giving archaeologists the ability to see through the ground itself. When the first complete images appeared on the monitors, conversation stopped. No one spoke. The screens revealed walls that existed on no known archaeological map. They showed vertical shafts plunging more than 100 feet beneath the surface, and scattered throughout the images were dense clusters of countless small objects that no one could immediately explain. What were they? No one knew. One possibility was surprisingly ordinary. Perhaps they represented the emperor's personal possessions, carefully recreated in durable materials so they would remain with him for eternity. For a ruler obsessed with immortality, surrounding himself with familiar objects, even after death, would have made perfect sense. But another explanation was far more disturbing. Some researchers suggested the scanners were not detecting objects at all. Perhaps they were revealing human remains, not clay substitutes, not symbolic figures. The emperor's actual court, buried beside him so they could continue serving him in the next world. As each new scan reached greater depths, the underground landscape changed character. It no longer resembled an organized palace complex. Instead, it began to resemble something far darker. Layers of disturbed earth stretched across the screens. Deep shadows appeared where no architectural feature should have existed. Empty spaces emerged without any obvious explanation. The image forming before the researchers looked less like an underground city and more like an enormous burial ground. It was a possibility few had expected: the graves beneath the army. For decades, no aircraft had been permitted to fly above the emperor's burial complex. The airspace remained heavily restricted, preventing researchers from studying the site from above. Albert Lin became one of the first investigators permitted to change that. Using advanced LiDAR technology, his aircraft scanned the landscape from overhead with remarkable precision. Laser pulses penetrated vegetation and subtle surface features, allowing computers to reconstruct hidden structures buried beneath the ground. For the first time, the entire complex could be viewed as a single interconnected system rather than isolated excavation pits. And what emerged from those scans suggested that the underground world extended far beyond anything previous generations of archaeologists had imagined. As the aircraft passed over the burial complex, LiDAR began doing what human eyes never could. The laser-based imaging system penetrated vegetation, subtle changes in the landscape, and layers of surface material, gradually building an incredibly detailed map of everything hidden beneath the ground. At first, the results expanded what archaeologists already suspected. Then, they began revealing what no one expected. Beneath the famous excavation pits lay an enormous underground network stretching far beyond the boundaries marked on existing archaeological maps. Buried walls extended into areas no one had ever excavated. Entire chambers appeared, where no recorded plans showed any structure at all. In several places, the scans suggested that large groups of people had been buried together beneath the earth at the same time. Even more intriguing, some sections displayed thermal signatures consistent with ancient fires. It was as though the ground itself had preserved the memory of intense heat for more than 2,000 years. Then everything changed. One section of the scan immediately captured the attention of the entire team. Deep beneath the rows of silent clay soldiers, the imaging revealed a series of irregular disturbances unlike anything they had seen elsewhere in the complex. They were far too disordered to be carefully planned architecture, yet they were far too consistent to be the result of natural geological activity. To experienced forensic archaeologists, the pattern looked disturbingly familiar. Mass graves. The surrounding soil carried unmistakable signs of violent disturbance. Instead of the slow, uniform compression expected from centuries of natural settling, the earth showed fractures and compression patterns that suggested sudden, powerful movement. These were what forensic geologists often describe as struggle layers, soil that appears to have been churned and compressed by bodies moving violently before finally coming to rest. Across the images, fracture lines cut through the underground layers, while dense clusters of material resembled what researchers associate with concentrations of human remains. Albert Lin stared at the monitor. For several moments, no one spoke. He had spent years interpreting difficult archaeological data from around the world. But this felt different. The underground complex no longer resembled the peaceful resting place of an emperor. It looked increasingly like a vast graveyard, and not a graveyard created to honor the dead. Historical records state that nearly 700,000 laborers were conscripted to build the emperor's burial complex. For decades, they carved tunnels, moved earth, transported stone, and created one of history's greatest construction projects. People came from every corner of the empire. Many never returned home. For generations, historians generally assumed those workers simply dispersed once construction ended, returning to their villages after completing their service. But the new scan data invited a much darker possibility. If even a small percentage of those laborers were buried within the complex after construction was completed, then the Terracotta Army may stand above one of the largest burial sites associated with an ancient construction project in human history. One long-standing theory suggests that the emperor used the enormous building program for more than construction alone. According to that interpretation, political rivals, suspected dissidents, dangerous witnesses, and individuals who knew too much could all be assigned to the work under the appearance of national service. And once their labor was no longer needed, they never left. The radar evidence added to the mystery. The disturbed soil patterns appeared consistent with violent movement beneath the surface. Researchers identified features resembling what forensic geologists describe as struggle layers, where compressed and mixed soil may indicate intense human activity before burial. Several underground tunnels also appeared to have been sealed from the outside, raising further questions about what may have happened inside them. Even deeper below the surface, another discovery emerged. The scans detected metallic signatures matching what ancient historical accounts describe as mechanical crossbow traps, devices supposedly designed to fire automatically at anyone entering restricted passages without authorization. Although any wooden trigger mechanisms would almost certainly have decayed over 2,000 years, bronze components could survive far longer. Then LiDAR revealed one final surprise. Hidden directly beneath the central burial mound was a massive pyramid-shaped structure formed from densely compacted earth. Nothing on the surface hinted at its existence. It had remained completely concealed beneath layers of soil for more than 2 millennia. It was, in every sense, a secret buried beneath another secret. It was a secret hidden beneath another secret. As the team continued studying the scans, one thought became impossible to ignore. Whatever the first emperor considered most important had not simply been buried beneath the earth. It had been protected by layer after layer of stone, compacted soil, hidden chambers, thousands of clay warriors, and perhaps even the people who had built the complex itself. From that perspective, the Terracotta Army seemed to take on a different purpose. The perfectly ordered ranks of soldiers no longer looked like a ceremonial display. They looked like a seal, a barrier standing between the living world and whatever lay below. If that interpretation was correct, then the soldiers were not guarding glory. They were guarding the true price of building an empire that was meant to last forever. Then another discovery drew everyone's attention. Near the center of the underground map, the team noticed something that did not belong. Hidden beneath the carefully planned network of known chambers was a single, isolated void. Unlike the surrounding structures, it appeared older and had been excavated significantly deeper. Whoever created it seemed determined to place it beneath everything else, beyond reach, beyond sight, and beyond memory. When the data from that chamber was examined more closely, it appeared to contain a single skeleton. Unlike many of the other possible burials suggested by the scans, this individual did not appear to have been discarded carelessly. The remains seemed deliberately arranged. The skeleton belonged to a young man, likely no older than his early 20s. Objects associated with the burial appeared unusual. They did not resemble the possessions of an ordinary laborer or prisoner. Instead, they appeared to be expensive, high-status items, the sort of belongings expected to accompany someone born into privilege and authority. Then came the detail that changed everything. The imaging suggested what appeared to be a bronze arrowhead embedded deep within the skull. If that interpretation proved correct, it would point not toward an accidental death or battlefield injury, but toward a deliberate execution carried out with remarkable precision. The burial itself only deepened the mystery. Whoever this man had been, he had been placed separately from everyone else and hidden in a location seemingly designed to remain undiscovered. How he died seemed increasingly clear. Who he was proved far more difficult to answer. Researchers turned once again to ancient historical records. Those records describe the sons of China's first emperor as princes raised inside one of the most powerful and most dangerous courts in the ancient world. It was a place where political ambition, suspicion, and fear existed side by side, and where trust could become a fatal mistake. Curiously, several of those princes simply disappear from the historical record. Their names appear in official documents. Then they vanish. No recorded deaths, no exile, no public disgrace, only silence. It is as though history itself had been instructed to erase them. As researchers compared those records with the location of the burial, the apparent quality of the grave goods, the unusual depth of the chamber, and the extraordinary effort taken to conceal it beneath the complex, one possible interpretation slowly began to emerge. It was an interpretation no one was eager to accept. Perhaps this was not the burial of a worker. Perhaps it was not the burial of an ordinary prisoner. Perhaps the young man had belonged to the imperial family itself. If so, his greatest enemy may never have stood outside the palace walls. It may have lived within his own household. The chamber raised even more questions. Rather than resembling a traditional tomb, its dimensions appeared more consistent with a confined enclosure. Some researchers have suggested that the position of the skeleton could indicate the young man may have remained alive within that underground space for a period before his death. Alive, hidden, cut off from the world above, forgotten while history continued without him. Examinations of the skeletal remains have been interpreted by some as showing stress markers that could be consistent with prolonged confinement under harsh conditions, although such interpretations remain the subject of ongoing study. That naturally led to another question. If this young man really was connected to the imperial family, who had ordered his death? As researchers pieced together the evidence, another chapter of the story slowly began to emerge. When the first emperor died, the throne did not pass peacefully to the next generation. His second son became emperor almost immediately, securing power during one of the most uncertain moments in the empire's history. For centuries, historians have suspected that his rise to the throne came at an enormous human cost. According to historical accounts, every brother who possessed a legitimate claim to rule became a potential threat. Not one rival, not two. Every possible challenger. If those suspicions were true, eliminating them would have removed every obstacle standing between the new ruler and absolute power. The scans appeared to raise even more questions. Researchers identified several additional underground voids positioned around the central burial mound. Each one shared striking similarities with the isolated chamber discovered earlier. The same proportions, the same extraordinary depth, the same deliberate placement beneath every other known structure. If those chambers truly contained additional burials, they suggested a chilling possibility. An entire generation of the imperial family may have disappeared beneath the emperor's tomb, buried alongside the countless workers, craftsmen, and prisoners who helped create it. To the ruler who inherited the empire, every potential rival represented the same danger. Every one of them was a secret. And in the world created by the first emperor, secrets were often hidden beneath the earth. While investigators continued examining the underground structures, another remarkable discovery emerged. Inside sealed chambers near the emperor's main burial complex, researchers recovered something few believed could have survived more than 2,000 years. Bamboo scrolls. Their condition was so delicate that even exposing them to ordinary air for too long could have destroyed them forever. Specialists created carefully controlled environments where temperature and humidity were monitored with extraordinary precision before attempting to unfold them. The work demanded patience, not days, weeks. Every movement had to be measured, every layer separated with extreme care. Finally, the ancient writing began to reveal itself. Many expected records celebrating the emperor's victories. Instead, the texts painted a very different picture. To the historians reading them, they resembled less a monument to imperial greatness than a record of fear. One document described an imperial order directing that 460 scholars and intellectuals be buried alive. Their crime was not armed rebellion. It was preserving philosophical traditions and historical ideas that the emperor had forbidden. Ideas suggesting that other ways of governing society could exist. Ideas implying that absolute authority did not belong to one man alone. Other scrolls described campaigns to destroy books throughout the empire. Political writings were not the only targets. Historical records disappeared. Philosophical works vanished. Scientific knowledge was destroyed. Medical texts were burned. Anything capable of encouraging independent thought became a threat. The goal appeared not simply to control the present. It was to reshape the future by controlling what future generations would be allowed to remember. Among the most disturbing discoveries were written confessions. They carried the names of engineers, craftsmen, and laborers involved in constructing the burial complex itself. Reading them today remains deeply unsettling. Some individuals admitted to criticizing imperial decisions. Others were accused of working too slowly. Some faced punishment merely because they had known or worked beside someone already under suspicion. The accusations spread endlessly, each confession creating new suspects. The process seemed to have no natural end. Once those confessions were recorded and archived, many of the people who signed them disappeared into the same vast burial complex they had spent years constructing. Every worker lived under observation. Every action was judged. Every conversation carried risk. Every friendship could become evidence. The deeper researchers looked into the surviving records, the clearer one pattern became. Fear was not simply a tool of government, it had become part of the foundation upon which the emperor's final kingdom was built. As the historians continued reading the fragile bamboo scrolls, one unsettling truth became impossible to ignore. Inside the emperor's world, trust had become a luxury no one could afford. Every friendship carried risk. Every conversation could become evidence. Every relationship was a potential liability. One careless sentence, one visible moment of hesitation, one accusation from a colleague hoping to protect himself. That was all it took. The person who arrived each morning as a worker could disappear beneath the earth before the day was over, becoming part of the emperor's eternal monument instead of helping to build it. As those ancient words echoed through the chambers of the burial complex, Albert Lin stood quietly among the silent clay warriors. Later, he admitted something had changed inside him during that moment. The soldiers no longer looked like masterpieces of ancient craftsmanship. They no longer represented military strength, imperial ambition, or artistic brilliance. Instead, they appeared to serve another purpose entirely. Standing in endless formation above the earth, they resembled an eternal guard posted over a place built upon fear, suffering, and silence. Their duty was not simply to protect an emperor. It was to ensure that everything buried beneath them remained forgotten.